Guidelines and templates enabling reuse of open source hardware design. Open source refers to a movement started in the 1990s in software development that advocates for all software source code to come with the freedoms for users to remix and share without restrictions. The transfer of open source freedoms from software to the world of physical objects gave birth to open source hardware. As defined by the Open Source Hardware Association, open source hardware is hardware whose design is made available in a way assuring anyone can study, modify, distribute, make, and sell the product. One major benefit of open source is to provide designers with the ability to freely reuse solutions in open collaboration across communities. Design reuse consists of using an existing design, totally or partially, to fulfill a new set of requirements. This is critical for developing open source hardware because the reuse of existing solutions allows replicating it in a new design. This approach aims at reducing development times, costs, and risks of failure. Once the quality of a design has been assessed, it is more secure to be reused. A member who is involved in a community-based and open-source product development process shares with companies some fundamental motivations. The main ones are reducing the development time and efforts, overcoming a lack of expertise, or reducing the risk of design errors. For example, by choosing a less optimal solution in terms of robustness or performance. Companies use a mix of techniques to facilitate design reuse. The first one consists of developing intelligent retrieval approach with information retrieval techniques such as search engines or data mining. The second technique consists of using data exchange formats in computer-aided design, storing models in well-structured libraries, and standardizing design solutions. The use of modular product architectures is also a very common approach used by companies to facilitate design reuse. The fourth technique consists of organizing the design data such as ontologies, management of data using information systems by product lifecycle management software to facilitate the search of existing solutions. Companies have successfully implemented a design reuse strategy, while the open source hardware communities still encounter obstacles today. These obstacles are high turnover of the community members, volunteer-based participation, large number of platforms and information support, absence of efficient search engines, absence of standards for representing design documentation. Between these obstacles, the last one is related to the information contents and structure. As a response, the Verbund der Automobilindustrie standard DIN SPEC 3105-1 is a first attempt to provide a general framework for technical documentation of open source hardware. This work is the basis for the development we will present now. Design documentation evolves along the development process and potentially entails a huge number of documents in various formats. A question emerges here. Can design reuse be improved through the creation of structured and easily accessible documentation? To answer this question, it is necessary to define guidelines for facilitating the creation of such documents. A guideline includes a method, a process, and a standard presentation of the documentation. There is also a template describing the content of the documentation. In this work, we have used a systematic approach based on literature search and interviews of makers to deliver guidelines and a template as minimum viable documentation for open source hardware. To allow anyone to apply one of the principles of open source explained at the beginning of this video, we have proposed the following structure for complete documentation: introduction and context, specification, design, manufacturing, assembly, maintenance, use, and disposal. This guideline is being developed on GitHub. For example, the documentation of a structural model consists of 3 sections depending on components such as mechanical, electronic, or software. The mechanical documentation consists of architectural structure, the geometry in an editable format, and the characteristics of the materials. The template inside the guidelines allows makers to easily create their documentation by editing the template. For example, the template of a functional tree allows the user to modify directly the graph of the technical functions on the app diagram. It is possible to fill in this graph and fork the project. For more information and to test it, you can visit the GitHub project by following the link here. You can also contact us for extra information. Thanks for your attention.